Mark Griffiths is one of the most prominent academic names worldwide in the field of gambling studies. A chartered psychologist and the director of International Gaming Research Unit at Nottingham Trent University, he is mainly concerned with the areas of abnormal social and health psychology, with particular emphasis on behavioral addictions, for example gambling addictions, video game addiction, internet addiction, cyber psychology and the psychology of sexual behavior. He cooperates with an impressive number of high-profile sector institutions. He has studied in depth centralized gaming models, interactive video terminals, structural characteristics of interactive gaming technologies, cross-cultural studies of slot machine gambling. If this wasn't enough, he has published over 200 refereed research papers, a number of books, over 50 book chapters and over 550 other articles. He has served on numerous national and international committees like BPS Council, BPS Social Psychology Section, Society for the Study of Gambling, Gambler Anonymous General Services Board, National Council on Gambling, etc. And he is a former national chair of GamCare. He also does a lot of freelance journalism in spare time, wherever he finds that, and he has appeared on over 1800 radio and television programs since 1988. He has been a consultant for government bodies including the Gambling Commission, Home Office, DCMS, Department of Health, Victorian Casino and Gaming Authority, Australia, and various international governments. In 2004 he was awarded the Joseph Lister Prize for Social Sciences by the British Association for the Advancement of Science as one of the UK's outstanding scientific communicators. What we like about him as poker players is his balanced and unbiased approach. As you find out from his papers and from this interview, he has been able to acknowledge the many positive and interesting sides of poker gaming and of PC-related gaming in general. As you may well guess, Professor Griffiths is relentlessly asked for interviews and recently has been forced to only allow international media to interview him. Nevertheless, he has been contacted by our PokerStrategy Italian community team and has kindly agreed to grant us what now, after scrolling down his gargantuan bibliography page, we realize being a very exclusive interview. You can have a look at his impressive work resume here in the link below the video. Welcome to PokerStrategy. We're happy to meet Mark Griffiths, one of the most eminent names in the study of gambling and electronic gaming social issues. So Mark, let's begin with a few words about yourself. I was curious, looking at all the materials you've been researching and writing, about what drove you to choose your present field of studies at first.
Well, it's actually a very personal reason to start with. I finished my psychology degree back in 1987, right. And I was trying to decide which PhD to do, and I had three PhD choices, one on face processing, one on gynecological problems in women, and one on adolescent gambling. And out of those three, the one on adolescent gambling seemed to be the most interesting PhD, mainly because there'd hardly been any research done on it before. But also gambling is something that's been inherent in my own family. I had a brother who had a severe gambling problem, ended up in prison as a result of that and other things. So I certainly know what it's like to live in a house where all of our rooms had to be locked because everything would get stolen by my brother to feed his addiction, basically. So in a way I had a very emotional reason for wanting to look at the issue of adolescent gambling. My brother was younger than me and had been gambling on slot machines from the age of 13 or 14, and although thankfully he grew out of that in his 20s, it is something that affected my family and everyone else around from a very early age. And certainly everyone understood things like alcoholism and drug addictions, but certainly nobody really understood gambling addiction. So I had a very emotional reason for starting, and I think a lot of people think because I had that experience I'm in some way anti-gambling, but I'm not at all. I'm actually, I do gamble myself. I'm actually playing some of the games actually helps me in my research, and I can see hopefully things from a gambler's perspective. And I've also worked with people who are gamblers themselves. I've published a lot of work with two brothers, in fact, Adrian Park and Jonathan Park, both of whom are, you know, I would call them ardent gamblers. Both of them play poker, for instance. Both of them were brought up on a diet of slot machines and other forms of gambling.
Right.
And I found, I think that brings an element of realism to the research that I do.
For sure.
And I think the industry historically have seen me as, you know, in some areas as public enemy number one because I've written about problem gambling. But really, I've got friends who research on things like alcoholism, and nobody ever accuses them of being anti-drinking. Yet I find it very strange when, you know, I'm researching problem gambling and gambling addictions. I sometimes get accused of being anti-gambling. I'm not at all. I don't think it's in the best interests of gambling companies to be, you know, taking money off problem gamblers. You know, if we believe that problem gambling shouldn't be part of the whole gaming industry, then the industry and myself, we're actually wanting to protect the same group of people. We want to maximise the fun for those people who have no problems, and obviously that's the vast majority, but we want to minimise the harm from vulnerable or susceptible individuals who may succumb to, you know, problem gambling or gambling addictions.
Well, I think your approach definitely shows through your work. I mean, there are some parts that are clearly, it's kind of an objective research to me. I think there was a little bit of bias there. So all of this gambling, your first encounter with it, so happens long before the craze of online poker gaming.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, it's obviously I've been in this field for 25 years now.
Right.
When I first started, you know, the idea of internet gambling, mobile phone gambling, interactive television gambling, you know, it just was not even on the horizon. I mean, I wrote my first paper on internet gambling back in 1996. As far as I know, I was the first academic to actually publish anything on that topic.
Yeah, that was pioneering, definitely.
Well, it certainly put it on the map. All I was doing was saying, here's an issue I think is going to be big. At that particular point, obviously I was looking at the more negative aspects of, you know, comparing online to offline gambling. But of course, what we've seen since the early 2000s is dramatic rise in, you know, the number of online gambling sites, the number of people who gamble online, and certainly in this country, here in the UK, if you look at the two biggest kind of activities that have taken off online, and that's online poker and online betting exchanges. And of course, these are two activities that you could argue, if you're very good at them, it's actually something that you can make money from. You know, we know that poker, it can be a very skillful game. It's something that people can win money from and do win money from. Obviously, you know, winners are there at the expense of losers. But, you know, the critical thing about what is it about online poker betting exchange, if you look at what is it about online poker and betting exchanges that are different from lots of the other forms of gambling that people can do online. And, you know, primarily these are activities that people compete against other real people. It's not that you're competing against a house or a casino that have an advantage.
Yeah.
You know, I think online poker players love to play against other people. They don't feel they're being ripped off. And most betting exchange sites and most online poker sites, obviously, the people who run those sites, they make their money from, you know, a small commission on the winnings. So I think from a gambler's perspective, it's, you know, they see that as good value. I mean, I have to be honest. Yeah. I mean, I'm a gambler myself. Okay, I wouldn't call myself a big gambler, but I do enjoy gambling. But, you know, when I walk into my casino, and roulette happens to be my game, I have to admit I'm not a poker player. But when I play roulette, you know, for me, it's all part of the whole experience. I go in early in the evening. I have a cheap subsidised meal, cheap subsidised drink. I spend a couple of hours at the roulette table, and when I walk out at the end of the evening, I may have spent 35, 40 pounds. Right. You know, maybe 50 euros, for instance. But that is actually cheaper than me watching my local football team lose. It's actually cheaper than me going. It's actually cheaper than me going to see a band at the arena. You know, for me, it's actually, I'm buying entertainment. You know, the fact that I may lose the money that I've gambled with, that's not the issue. You know, for 4 or 5 hours of eating, drinking, and gambling and having a good time, that is a comparable price to other things that I might do in the evening. So for me, you know, if you like, the actual gambling stake that I put down, that's my price of entry. Obviously, sometimes I walk out of the casino and I'm slightly up. Sometimes I've broken even. You know, probably more of the times I've lost, but I certainly haven't lost all the money I'm prepared to lose. And if you take it in the spirit of you're buying entertainment, I think gambling can be a fantastic, fantastic activity to do. But obviously, in online poker and offline poker and online poker, people who play that seriously, you've got some people obviously who treat it as a job. Those who use poker as a way of supplementing their income if they feel that they're good at it. But also, even if you are somebody that's just playing it for fun, we did a survey here amongst our students. We had nearly 500 students who did. Filled out a survey for us, and what was one thing that was coming through to them, even if they were losing money, one thing they were saying is because you can play for a couple of pence per game, it was actually over the course of an evening a fairly cheap activity to do, and they were arguing it's cheaper than actually going out to buy alcohol all night. For them again,
it provides a strong entertainment. And
that's it. And obviously, for some people, there are lots of reasons why people play online poker, whether it's an exercise of their skill, whether it's the social activity of taking part. You can see, winning money, obviously for professionals, that's the key element. But for people who are not professionals, online poker provides a lot of things, the kind of camaraderie, the exercise of their skill. And even if they lose, people usually feel they've got something out of the activity. People don't continually engage in an activity unless they're getting something out of it. And we know with gambling, particularly if you like, the more hardened you become, is that you start almost gambling with money rather than for it. You use the money as a way of keeping score. And obviously for the vast majority of people that doesn't become problematic, but we have obviously got this small minority that it can take over their life. But I think I think we always have to put this into context, is that with most activities, whether it's drinking, gambling, any consumptive activity, doing things in moderation, there's no harm in doing it whatsoever. And even those people who do things to excess, unless there is a negative detriment on that person's life, you couldn't actually say that is, a problematic behavior. I've done lots of work on similar things to online gambling, things like online computer game playing. And I've got people who play World of Warcraft or EverQuest for hours and hours a day. But for some people, yes, this is clearly a problem because it's compromising their job, their relationship, other areas of their life. But I've also got players who actually doesn't compromise any areas of their life whatsoever, and they see it as life-enhancing, self-affirming, and something that's positive in their life. And people, I know people who play online poker who do actually not necessarily make a living from it, but certainly make money from it and supplements other areas of their financial income. It's something that is seen as very positive. So, obviously whenever I do a piece of research and, you report the findings, is the media tend to pick up on the more negative side. They never really highlight the positive side. If you look at some of the things I've written on poker, I've tried to say there are a lot of kind of skills, almost transferable skills that you could argue you get from, playing poker. You could say there are, interpersonal skills there. You could say there are some numerical skills there. There are, some kind of evaluation skills there. And, even the art of bluffing, I think, could be very important in the workplace. I mean, if you're in the kind of sales business, having those, those kind of, almost what I would call self-deception skills. As long as they're not used, in an exploitative way, but they're used in a way to facilitate things, they can, obviously play an influence. But, I think, the whole thing about poker is a skill game. And if it's a skill game, there are rules and there are strategies and all of those things. Obviously, just playing them out on a poker table, that, I've argued certainly in a couple of my
it's a bit paradoxical because, I remember one of the greatest players in the world now, I don't remember which one, was saying, once you focus on playing well and you end your sessions and you've been playing good, and you don't care anymore about whether you won or lost, then you enter the field of great players, which is funny because it's a kind of weird mixture of like Buddhism and capitalism, because really psychologically you have to develop an emotional balance which is totally unrelated to money, So,
and again, I think that's a nice fine balancing act that people have to do. And I think the very best players are able to bring those very different facets to the fore. Obviously, in terms of, for every 100 poker players that you get, you're going to get 1 or 2 are very good, which obviously means that the remaining 98 or 99% are probably losing.
Yeah, going
or
to
at least and that's that. It's a zero-sum game basically. So we know that winners are there at the expense of losers. But I think anyone that goes into online poker or offline or online poker expecting to make money, that's the wrong attitude to go into. Obviously, when you're buying in, is that you are putting your skill on the line, but obviously people have to realise that whatever your bankroll is, you could potentially lose that, and the kind of golden rule is obviously have an amount that you can afford to lose, because that is the kind of basic. Staying in control is obviously never go beyond what you can afford to lose. Nobody wants to lose. Unfortunately, people do have to lose, and that's the golden rule. But I think you've got to realise that even when you've staked money and lost it, the actual playing of the game can be highly exciting, gives you a lot of fun, and you can see why, and if you treat that as your payment for engaging in the game, I think that's a different mindset, but it actually keeps you in control.
Here at Poker Strategy, of course, we are always looking for, new tips and new leads. I was wondering if you can quote a few researchers and a few, guidelines that strike you over the course of your studies.
I don't know of any good academic poker text, for instance. I don't think that's actually been written yet. I used to write for a gambling magazine called Inside Edge, and I certainly sent you some of the things that I've written on poker in that, and I'm quite happy, rather than answer it on this interview, is to write you a few things based on those columns, which do give hints and tips from a more academic and psychological perspective, and you can put those up on your site. I mean, academically, remember, we're always maybe 2 or 3 years behind what's happening in the real world.
That's
because until something becomes an issue, it's not research. And of course, until even most of the research I've done, particularly on poker, has been totally unfunded.
But just like you were saying, we miss contact with the academic world. So I was wondering if some of the people you've been working with have developed any visions. There was another article in which there are some categories, for example, of players which completely escape my poker-specific culture, like the general, the artisan.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, again, that was a classic piece of what I would call pop psychology. I mean, and I think you asked me a question in your set of questions on the email about, are there any particular kind of psychoanalytic types? Well, that kind of work's just never been done yet.
Right.
Again, what I'm saying is that, but at the moment, in terms of what's psychologically being done on both online and offline poker, there's hardly anything. There really is. There's so few academic studies in the literature. And again, what I can do for you, I mean, I have got some columns that I've written that I didn't send you, particularly on things like non-verbal communication and various things that have been looked at academically, which I'm quite happy to adapt for you to put up on your site. But obviously you've now stimulated my interest. It's something if it's being discussed on your site, it's something I'd be quite prepared to go away and have a look and see what's actually happening there.
I guess, well, for us it's a chance to bridge with the academic world. For sure, there are many topics being discussed about what psychological constructive methods are there, especially when we talk about facing tilts, a rather mysterious phenomenon somehow.
Well, right? To be honest, it is actually academically, it's very much associated with going on tilt is something that's been written about in relation to poker, probably more than other types of gambling. But obviously that feeling of just feeling you've absolutely lost control at that particular point. It's something that, academics are aware of. Obviously, players are very well aware of it, but obviously companies are aware of it too. So, for instance, one of the companies that I do consultancy with, which is a Finnish company called Ray, R-A-Y, they have on their online poker site, they have what they call a panic button. And it's actually for people who, if they go on tilt, people can just press that button, it automatically just closes down everything. That's a very socially responsible measure, but it's also the industry realizing that this phenomenon is very real, that some players do experience it, and that, you know, what they're trying to do is just to help players at that very particular point while they're playing. And this is specifically for online poker. This is not, it wasn't designed for other types of activity, although they're thinking about using what they call the panic button on other forms of gambling, but it's actually from their work and their experience of poker players that's come to the fore. So obviously, in terms of a psychological mechanism that's out there, it has not been researched as far as I know. People refer to it, and there's almost like I've never seen actually a good operational definition of what going on tilt means, either within poker or other types of gambling. But as I say, that, I think poker, and in fact lots of other areas of gambling, have not been looked at in depth psychologically. And you mentioned right at the start that I'm one of the foremost names. Well, I'm one of the foremost names mainly because we've got so few people worldwide that are looking at this. So to be honest, saying that I'm one of the best known in this area isn't actually saying a huge amount. Worldwide, if you think, let's just say you take a subject like diabetes, there may be 10,000 researchers working in diabetes, but you take something like gambling psychology, and there's probably 30 of us in the world. And what I'm trying to do, it's not to belittle my own work. I'm very proud of what I've done. If you've published over 100 papers, then just by the fact that there's so little in the field, you are a well-known name, and there are probably 5 or 10 of us in the world who've consistently published over the last 20 years. So we're very well known, but it actually...
Well, here you're talking to that kind of 1 million, 1.5 million members who represent the niche in which you work. So to us, you still are, and we don't really care about about
it's fine. It's not I mean, don't get me wrong. I love being well known in my area, and I'd rather be in my position. But it's also, I mean, you asked me right at the start, why did I get into this? People say to me, I've been very lucky in my career because I became the youngest ever professor in this university by a long, long way. I mean, I was only 35 when I became a full professor, which in the British system, most people, it takes them till they're 50 or whatever. But I kind of believe in that kind of Theodore Roosevelt thing, is that the harder I work, the luckier I get. So, and I think there's some kind of truth in there. You make your own luck, and obviously, I've researched on things like luck, and even though it's a good psychological concept, and a lot of people kind of inherently believe in the concept of luck, I do believe that you do kind of make your own luck, and and gambling has been a very profitable area for me financially. Obviously, in terms of my job and everything I do.
The safest side, like you got into gambling in the safest way possible, right?
Well, of course. Well, to be honest, the safest way possible is to be an operator. I used to joke at conferences 20 years ago that the only way you could make money from a slot machine was to own one yourself. That, to be honest, is the maxim of the industry, really.
Really, one of the first things I wanted to ask you, we are an international community, and of course statistics studies are really, really hard to carry out because it's such a, heterogenic and differentiated community. But I was thinking if you have any data about why are women so much less into poker or probably gambling than men? Has it got to do with some kind of aggressive instinct, something like...
Well, no, I mean, that's very simple reason. Well, obviously it's well known in looking at all forms of gambling. There are at the moment, only bingo is the only game where women outnumber men. This is worldwide. There are games like lotteries and scratch cards where women play equally as much as men. All the other forms of gambling, well, certainly in this country, slot machines is very male-dominated. I do actually know in other jurisdictions, some slot machines are played more by females. But the general rule of thumb is that those activities that feature inter-gambler competition, direct, so things like card games, games of skill, games where other people around you can see you playing, are very much favoured by men, as opposed to, slot machines, lotteries. These are all individual activities that can be done alone without any kind of third party looking at you. Right. If you lose, you don't have to worry about what other people think about you, and that's a very stereotypical thing, but there's actually a lot of truth in it. Now, obviously, what I've argued in my writings is that when it comes to online gambling, is that obviously online is a gender-neutral environment. Here is an environment that for women is non-stigmatizing, it's non-alienating, people feel very safe in it, they feel very anonymous in it, all because of this non-face-to-face interaction. And the great thing about the internet, you've got women who, if they want to, they can create a name for themselves, an avatar. They can be, they can totally change their gender if they want to. Mm-hmm. In our studies, we've, even though we've done very few of them, we've found around 20% of women say they've, swapped gender online, compared to only 12% of men who have actually mm-hmm. swapped gender. And there are, if you ask why do you do that, well, men swap gender when they're playing online poker very much for strategic reasons. Yes. They will say they do it because people in the poker room will treat them differently if they think they're a female. Yes. They think that gives them an advantage. However, females will say that they pretend to be males, not for any strategic advantage, but because they don't want to be hit on by the other guy online. Yes. And they also do it, obviously, because it gives them a feeling of equality, and that, it's, as I say, not only is it a gender-neutral environment, it's a very, in terms of equality terms, it's a very kind of equal and stress-free and non-alienating, non-stigmatizing environment as well. So I do believe they're going to, if women are going to come into gambling, online is the kind of back door which they can come through it in a much safer environment. And obviously, I don't know what it's like in Italy and other places, but in the UK, we're suddenly seeing a lot of the market for gambling. The online bingo operators have really gone after women. If you look at an average evening of television here in the UK, is that between 7 o'clock in the evening and 10 o'clock, right, we are bombarded every single advert break with adverts for online bingo, whereas after 10 o'clock, online poker, there's this kind of demographic shift that happens, that the 7 to 10 time frame is women and online bingo, the 10:30 till 2 o'clock in the morning is the online poker male right demographic, and it's so demarcated, and this is that obviously advertisers know their markets, what programs they're watching, so they online bingo is advertised in the middle of soap operas, online poker is advertised in the middle of the sporting programs, along with obviously betting as well. But I believe, and this is something I've said in writing, is that in the next 30 years, I believe that, there'll be no difference in 30 years' time between men and female in terms of, do you ever gamble? The only difference will be like the drinking markets, is that men and women will differ in their choice of favourite drinks in the same way that in terms of their favourite forms of gambling. Mm-hmm. So in terms of participation and in terms of problem gambling, I think it will be equaled out. But that's how I think it's going to change.
It was a wonderful start, and I hope we can see you now and then on our forums and develop some interesting approach and a little culture about poker and psychology and social studies.
Well, that's fine. Obviously, now that you've made contact with me, I feel comfortable and trusting. As I say, I usually only do interviews with major TV, and it's fine. I did look at your site. That influenced me in the terms of wanting to speak to you, and I will start to get some stuff that you can put onto your site. I'm happy to continue that dialogue, and thank you for getting in contact with me, and I hope that my stuff will be of interest to people who visit the PokerStrategy website.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, Mark. Thank you. Have a good day.
Then. Bye.
Bye.